Okay, let's go ahead with our demonstration on how to use oil pastels. This is for my Drawing 1 class, and so I just have a simple, cheap student grade set of oil pastels. And what we're going to do is we're going to practice 3 different techniques. I'm going to break it up, the videos, into the 3 different sections. So I'm first going to start with smooth blending. What we're going to do for the smooth blending is we're just going to use monochromatic color. So in my set I have white. I'm going to use to tint it. I have some blues, and I have I'm going to stay away from adding black to make it darker. Instead, I'm going to use a dark blue. When I look at my sets of colors, I'm going to try to make sure that they all look good together, that they all will blend easily together and represent a good value. I'm going to take the ultramarine out because it's kind of more of a purplish blue in my set, so I'm going to pull that out. So what I want to do is I'm going to start and I'm going to layer the oil pastel. I find it easiest to start light and work dark. When I'm using the oil pastels, they often will get really dirty, and you can see here earlier I was using yellow, so I'll often clean them off using a Kleenex or a piece of paper towel or another piece of paper. And so I'm going to start with the scale first so I can practice. I'm going to layer it on, but I'm going to use basically light pressure, and then I'm going to ease up on the pressure so that I see more of the paper showing. Then I'm going to use my next value, and I'm going to clean off my pastel so it's not so dirty, and I'm going to layer the light blue, and I'm going to make it go over the white so it's not just a white but it's also a light blue, and I'm going to ease up on the pressure around the middle there. Then I'll layer on my cobalt blue. I want to overlap the color slightly, and then on the very end I'm going to use my Prussian blue. So I've got a real basic value scale. Obviously it's not too pretty, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and press heavier, not hard but heavier, to blend them together. So I'm going to use the lighter of the 2 colors. So here I was using light blue and white, so I'm going to actually use the white to tint it more. I'm going to go ahead and go over it, and you can see that it's starting to blend those colors together, and I can go a few different directions to make it smoother. But notice I'm not pressing too hard. If I press really hard, it often gets really streaky, and then also I get lots of bits of oil pastel that will break off. So I'm going to mix this light blue into the white a little bit. Then I'll use the cobalt and blend it into the light blue. And if a stripe appears, right, what I'll usually do is blend with the lighter 2 colors. So I'll ease up on the pressure and kind of go back and forth, and usually I can get that to go away. So I'm just kind of like blending on the surface. So it takes a little time for me to kind of build these up. If you get fancier oil pastels, it might actually go a little bit quicker. Sometimes some of the cheaper ones actually are harder to blend because they're a little bit drier. These are pretty creamy for a student grade. Okay, so I'm just going to go back and forth until I can get it to blend together, and I want to cover up the paper. I'm using Canson paper. I find it works really good for oil pastels. If you're also working with other students, construction paper works really well. I typically like to use gray or a light pastel color because it tends to grab on better and you see a little less of the white dots coming through. Okay, so on the circle we're going to make it into a sphere, so I will usually give students a guide, right? So I'm giving you a guide to go off of, and so we can see the light sources coming from the upper left side. We've got our highlight where it's the brightest, and then gradually it's darker, and then we have our shadow. So we're going to try to recreate this. I don't really have space on the handout for a cast shadow, so I'm going to go ahead and skip that. The highlight is almost on the edge, and it's kind of like a circular shape. So I'm going to go in there with a circle, and then I'm going to ease up on the pressure, just like I did on the scale. I like to shade with the contour, so I like to shade in circular motions, kind of spiraling out from the highlight. All right, so once again, I'm still going lightly. Then I'll go ahead and overlap the light blue. Let me get rid of that. I'll overlap that. I can keep those marks nice and close together to make it a little less streaky. Then I'll overlap my next blue. So I'm going to overlap them a little bit. Maybe put a little bit of the pale blue on the edge. And then in the core of the shadow, I'm going to go in with that Prussian. So I've just got a nice base. I'm going to try to stay in the lines as much as I can there. Okay, so I have a base. Now I'm going to go ahead and go in just a little bit heavier. So if you're one of my students, or if you're using this as kind of a tutorial, feel free to watch this over and over again as you kind of practice through, keeping in mind that practice makes better, not necessarily perfect, but it'll make you better at the technique so that you can get the surface that you want. For my students, we're going to work on a portrait, and so we want to make sure that our skin looks smooth, and so we're going to probably use the smooth blending for that for that part. But then we might use hatching, where we're using lines for our hair. And I'm okay sometimes with it being a little streaky. I don't think it has to be perfectly smooth. If I wanted it perfectly smooth, I might pick a new media. I might use oil paint, or maybe a softer pastel, like a dusty pastel. It's okay to have the mark of the artist, to be able to see the touch of the artist, just as long as your marks are intentional. You're thinking about your direction, you're thinking about your placement of your marks. It's okay if it's a little streaky, just as long as it makes sense for the overall effect. So you might have noticed I was cleaning up a little issue. Sometimes I get little beads of clay, or sorry, oil pastel. That's just teaching ceramics. Little beads of oil pastel get caught, and so sometimes it makes it harder to blend. Right. So kind of blend that into it. So keep going until you've got most of that paper covered, so it looks nice and smooth. Right. So I'm pressing lightly. Sometimes if you press really, really heavy, you'll actually have to press really, really heavy in order to get it to blend better. But I like to use light pressure. I find that works better. Okay. So I'm going to keep going until it's completely filled in. Hope that helps.